After the massive success of the first Jurassic Park, everyone everywhere had dinosaur fever. Numerous knockoffs and children's films attempted to cash in on the blockbuster success, and the sudden rise in dino popularity made a sequel absolutely inevitable. Spielberg said himself that he left that shot of the shaving cream lying in the mud as an open-ended invitation for a Jurassic Park 2 when the time would eventually come. However, after Michael Crichton's sequel novel veered off in a totally different direction, the second film began to take an entirely different shape. Jurassic Park went on to win Oscars for Best Sound Editing, Best Sound Mixing, and Best Visual Effects after it became the highest-grossing film of its time. Its sequel would follow that up in 1997. The Lost World Jurassic Park became the highest-grossing film of the year just before Titanic was released in December. That particular movie would later go on to beat Jurassic Park's box office total and become the highest-grossing movie until Avatar eclipsed it in 2009. Lost World would go on to be nominated for the Best Visual Effects Oscar, and Spielberg would win Best Director for this movie at the Rembrandt Awards. To say that The Lost World is a very different film from the first is an understatement. Unlike the first movie, this second installment trims most of the continuity errors out entirely, save for a few noticeable exceptions during the third act. It's also an infinitely better directed and more technical movie than the first on nearly every level. At multiple points in the film, Spielberg will set up camera shots whose movement relies directly on that of the action that's going on in frame. The scene where Ian Malcolm famously yawns on the subway just before walking into the train is composed of a 30-second take wherein the camera smoothly transitions into the vehicle before stopping as soon as Goldblum sits down. An even more interesting take is actually used to kick off the movie. The waves hitting the rocks of a desolate island with a wide variety of cloudy overcast covering the sky seems like the perfect setting for an irritated British man to set up his family picnic. This movie sets the tone up early on as being deeply sarcastic and quite cynical when compared to the first. Our camera racks focus on a yacht just before we begin to follow different people coming into frame with wine glasses, before the real interest is revealed, the little girl holding the sandwich, and her inevitable run-in with a vicious Compsognathus is carried over with a bit of dark humor when the movie cuts to some tasty ribs just before her mother calls out to tell her that lunch is ready. You see, The Lost World plays with the fact that the audience is already aware of the inevitable danger that will come to the people who venture to the island, and this is captured brilliantly by Jeff Goldblum's Ian Malcolm. Again, unlike Jurassic Park 1, this Malcolm doesn't start off as a flirty womanizer and realistically approaches every situation with the same mindset that he had during the second half of Part 1. Here, he's been elevated from supporting character to primary protagonist, and his outlook on every situation is displayed quite differently to what's come before. Speaking of which, Malcolm has been summoned by Hammond in an effort to bury the hatchet and help keep people off of his island by sending in a research team to document the animals and validate his earlier claims that dinosaurs were in fact created by the genetics company. Of course, Ian refuses until he finds out that Sarah Harding, his girlfriend, is already on the island. Understandably shaken, Malcolm immediately heads off with Eddie Carr and Nick Van Owen to bring her back. Sarah Harding's character is introduced early on as someone who is incredibly compulsive and quite reckless in her behavior when it comes to viewing the dinosaurs. This is the entire reason Malcolm was so eager to get her out of there in the first place, and it's actually an important character flaw that plays a major role in a continuation on a scene that takes place in the first movie. Coming along for the ride are some excellent performances by actors like Peter Stormare and Harvey Jason, but no one steals the show quite like big game hunter Roland Timbo, who's played awesomely by Pete Postlethwaite. In case any of you didn't know, this is my favorite character in the whole series. Every line of dialogue he utters is instantly quotable, and everything from the way he moves to his mission to kill a Rex, buck only, leave me incredibly satisfied every time I see him on screen. Of course, the plan takes a turn for the worst once Nick Van Owen is revealed to be an extreme environmentalist sent by Hammond to partake in a corporate civil war between he and newly elected CEO of InGen, Peter Ludlow, who just so happens to be his estranged nephew. After finding an injured baby T-Rex, Nick decides to take it back to the trailers in a bleeding heart effort to help it, much to everyone else's dismay. To his credit, it would be pretty unbelievable for the extreme environmentalist who was sent to the island to sabotage the enemy if he didn't attempt to help the animal. This leads into one of the most most expertly crafted sequences Spielberg has ever put to film, and by far one of the most memorable moments in the franchise. Janusz Kaminski's cinematography here is absolutely gorgeous, and again, the camera work and acting is top-notch. I don't even have to mention how excellent the special effects are, considering I've already said that this movie was nominated for an Oscar because of them. All of this comes to a head once Sarah Harding climbs over the edge of the cliff to see the reaching hand of an InGen hunter, and after grabbing it, effectively ends the first act and begins the second, wherein we see what we're left with. Two opposing teams who must band together in order to survive the trek out of this lost world. Now, Dieter Stark is understandably angry at Nick Van Owen after Roland relinquishes his role as second in command for the camp's sabotage, and the short scuffle ends with Ludlow revealing that their only way out of here is by heading over to the operations building, which Hammond ran off of geothermal power. That's right, these islands were volcanic way before Fallen Kingdom was ever written, and in fact, this bit of a plot point is actually taken directly from Michael Crichton's books. Eventually, Dieter is killed by the compies in a gruesomely shot payback sequence, and an exhausted Sarah Harding is confronted by Roland for fear of injuries after blood is found dripping from her body and onto some nearby ferns. She brushes it off as if it's nothing, just as Nick decides to pull the bullets from Roland's gun so that he won't be able to kill a Rex. Remember when I mentioned that Sarah Harding's character flaw would come up in a moment that plays off as an extension of Jurassic Park? Well, it's coming up right around now. A memorable part of the first movie involved Ian Malcolm's explanation of what the butterfly effect is to the audience. He famously showed Dr. Sattler by dropping some water on her hand before telling us that a butterfly could flap its wings in Central Park, and this could result in rain instead of sunshine in Peking. The point being made that unpredictability of certain outcomes is inherent in situations that we cannot control. Late that night, Harding begins to feel the impact tremors of two massive predators heading her way, and while gazing up at her blood-soaked jacket, she utters the words, "Oh no," instantly addressing her character's ignorance vocally on screen. This particular variable has led to the Rexes stalking this invading tribe, and in their effort to defend their territory, chaos ensues. Eventually, the camp is awakened and every hunter runs in a frenzied panic except for Roland Timbo, who runs towards the animals aiming his 600 Nitro Express high. His hunting partner is dragged away by the other hunters, who look at Roland as if he's some Captain Ahab in a terrible chase for the white whale. Roland pulls the trigger but is met with the realization that his weapon was carrying nothing but useless shells, a product of Van Owen's continued bleeding heart efforts to save the dinosaurs. Unfortunately for Nick and the rest of our protagonists, Roland is the second variable in this butterfly effect. Instead of preventing the Rex's death like Nick had hoped, the big game hunter uses this time to successfully tranquilize the animal in one of the greatest shots of the series. John Williams' score flares up with an excellent assortment of bongos ringing out to accompany Roland's loading of the tranquilizer gun. The camera keeps its focus close on Pete's face before pulling out as the hunter advances forward. During this same shot, the music slows down and we're given the awesome reveal of the male Tyrannosaur who stayed back to forage through the camp. Roland soon presents himself, causing Williams' score to roar to life just as he fires at the animal. It roars back in response while we get a POV shot of the Rex while Timbo reloads. All of this culminates in another moment of dark humor where the cowardly Burke is eaten by the female Rex once a deceptively non-poisonous snake slithers down his shirt. The infamous long grass scene gives us another awesome series set piece, and the worker village gives us an infamously stupid moment of jarring absurdity once Kelly Gymnastics kicks a raptor out of a window. Finally, the reveal that InGen has acquired the male Tyrannosaur because of Van Owen's tampering sets up the final setting of the end of the third act, and in a blink and you'll miss it scene, Nick actually slumps down inside of the chopper in defeat, while Ian and Sarah look on. Here comes the biggest issue with the film. Once the movie decides to transition its setting to San Diego, we're left with a rather jarring relocation that doesn't flow with much of what's come before. It's excellent filmmaking once you're in the city, and the ghost ship that crashes into the dock is photographed excellently and happens to be a clever send-up to both King Kong and the 1925 version of Conan Doyle's Lost World, but the pacing is rushed during this pivotal moment in the film. This comes complete with a noticeable continuity error where a severed hand is left on the wheel of the ship, despite the area looking rather unlikely for the Rex to have gotten its head inside of. Concept art shows that originally there was supposed to be a hole in the wheelhouse where the animal would have broken through, but because all we get is broken windows and missing doors, it's understandably confusing for those that have caught it. Not quite as serious as seeing Timmy shut a door that's already closed or watching the mechanical egg turning hand disappear, but still it's the same sort of thing. The movie ends with a brilliant reprise of the original Jurassic Park theme and some awesome photography of the Rex family, Stegosaurus herd, and beautiful pteranodons living their lives in isolation on Site B. The Lost World is a movie that tries and succeeds in being completely different to the first. It's objectively filmed incredibly well, has better cinematography than the first, adds a layer of subtext during certain scenes that actually build off of the ideas that have come before, and gives us some of the best character performances of many of these actors' careers and subsequently the franchises as well. John Williams' score is better than his work on the first movie this time around too, and I'm not the only one to say that. Steven Spielberg said it himself in interviews that you can find on the movie's Blu-ray. And again, I cannot stress how incredibly well this film is directed. There is a reason he won Best Director for his work here, and it's because the film is masterfully crafted and given a unique voice to that of what's come before. One of the first polls that I ever ran for the channel actually asked you guys what your favorite sequel was in the franchise, and an overwhelming 51% chose The Lost World as being that movie. While its message is usually construed as an environmentalist-only story, it actually reprimands Nick for engaging in extremist behavior against his enemies, and while it undoubtedly is about conservation at its core, it's nowhere near as black and white as many would have you believe. I'm sure it's easy to pick up on the fact that I believe that this is a very high quality movie, but I'm not going to pretend like those raptor gymnastics and serious third act pacing issues don't exist. For that, I'd have to say that The Lost World deserves an earned A- for being an awesomely different movie that improves upon some aspects of its predecessor, but also fumbles the ball in a few areas that it really should have gotten a touchdown. I just want to say that a while ago, I actually asked my friend Ivan Ortega, who happens to be an active editor of films in the industry, if he'd be interested in re-editing the third act to somehow help the pacing in Lost World and make it even better. But he actually didn't think it was nearly as big as a problem as I did. No, he drew his attentions to the movie that actually followed this one. But that's a discussion for a whole nother video. Next time I do this, I'll be reviewing Jurassic Park 3, a movie that I actually know a lot of you younger guys are big fans of. On my most recent viewing, I must admit that my feelings for it are a bit different from what they used to be, so be sure to look out for that review in the very near future. Now, before I go, I want to thank my game wardens, as well as all of my InGen executives. I'd also like to thank all of my park workers and InGen hunters as well. It means the world to me that you guys enjoy what I do so much, and I seriously am eternally grateful for every ounce of support that you've shown me. I can never say thank you enough. Now, I'd like to thank all of you for watching this video, and hope that you all enjoy today's content. If you feel like I deserve it, I'd appreciate the like, and hope that you'll consider subscribing if you're interested in hearing from me again. I'll see you all in the next video, guys, and as always, take it easy.